Castaway, Apollo 13, Captain Phillips. What do these all have in common? They are stories of explorers who find themselves in isolated, remote, hostile landscapes with nothing but their ingenuity to save them. Now, we're no Tom Hanks, but for the last 4 weeks, we've been battling our way against the trade winds with a disintegrating boat, all in our quest to reach one of the most remote islands of the South Pacific. It hasn't been easy, and we've surprised ourselves with some of the solutions we've found to unexpected challenges. But right now, we're living a nightmare, stranded in an uninhabited atoll with no way to leave. We are 700 nautical miles into our 1,500-mile journey to the Gambiers. We have been battling seasickness, we've torn our sails, but this could be the moment that completely ends our journey. Do you want to explain what's happened?
For the last wee while, you may have heard us whinging about our autopilot not working.
Yes, it's not a good sign when it's in 100 pieces on the table, is it?
Our autopilot isn't working. And it wasn't working before I took it apart. However, it's now really not working.
Really not working even more.
And I think my multimeter is not working either, which isn't helping with the testing. All right, so basically our autopilot is like a box with a motor in it and a bunch of cogs, and it connects to a big bike chain, and that bike chain connects to the literal helm wheel. And this motor, which is currently in too many pieces, I've just put it partially back together. It was acting kind of funny, and we were getting lots of motor stall messages and overheats and funny grinding sounds.
Yeah, it wasn't happy.
Not happy. So I took it apart and discovered that in here there's like the motor assembly and then a bunch of magnets that go around the outside of that motor. They're made of something called neodymium, which is really brittle, and they were in like 1,000 pieces.
Hooray!
So I've just spent...
So it's even better because we've now got 1,000 magnets.
1,000 magnets. The strength of 1,000 magnets. So I've quite literally just super glued them back together into the housing, which is quite hard because they're all fighting each other. So they literally wrestle and kind of push away from each other as you try and glue them in. And it isn't perfect because there's a bit of a noise. But that's pretty good. I think that should be enough.
It's turning, which is more than it was doing.
It's turning. It's probably not going to last forever, but it might last a little bit longer because it wasn't moving at all. So now that it moves, sort of, I then started dealing with the front end of this, which is kind of what tells that motor to turn left or right or backwards and forwards. And that uses these little pieces of carbide, essentially, on springs. They kind of touch down in the spindle, and then they send a current through, and that creates an electromagnet, which then interacts with the magnets I've just glued that together and causes it to rotate. Physics lesson.
Hooray.
Physics is confusing. That's not what they used to say in school. However, one of these has been pretty badly chipped at some point in his life, possibly all associated to the same catastrophe that we've been going through. So I've just gently sanded it back just to clean it up, and just cleaned everything, really. I mean, this is the third piece of pig mat I'm on.
Yeah, wow.
And it's just...
I mean, your hands look really
caked.
clean.
And they've been cleaned multiple times now. This is actually pretty good. And then I'm just recoating everything and making everything sort of good, I hope. Oh, and all of this, sorry, jumping around, all of this started because I was able to just slightly open the housing, and I noticed part of the reason we were getting all the motor stalls wasn't just the smashed up magnets, the chipped brushes, as they're called, these carbide brushes, but one of the wires, the positive wire, was literally just floating in mid-space. It totally disconnected itself. So when the motor was turning one way, I think it was just pushing that wire toward a contact and arcing and making electricity work, and then going back and coming loose, and then we get notifications. So
basically we were sailing along by magic.
So hopefully we'll put all this back together now, and then we'll test it just on direct 12 volts. And if this thing turns in one direction and I turn the wires over and it turns the other direction,
we have something.
We might have an autopilot back. But if we don't, we are kind of stuck here.
Yeah, so we have arrived in Tahiti, which is like the sort of the last atoll in the sort of busy bit where there's lots of atolls that we could pull over in, and lots of them are inhabited, and quite a few sailors go around this place. We've got one more jump to one more atoll, and then a long kind of 5 to 7 day passage to the Gambiers. Even the 2-day jump to Hao or Manu, the next place that we're going to stop, is all upwind. So if we were to just set off without the autopilot, we would be hand steering for the whole time, 2 to 3 days. No let up, nowhere else to stop. We cannot do any kind of shorter jumps. There's nowhere else to pull over. So that would limit us, instead of doing like 6-hour watches, to doing sort of 2 or 3-hour watches, because you just can't concentrate for any longer than that amount of time in one go without taking a rest. Which is okay, but with only 2 of us means that we can't get any sleep for more than 2 hours at a time while the other person is hand steering. So we have a bit of a problem on our hands. We're gonna try and fix this, and then if it doesn't work, we'll have to find a different solution of something. Maybe there'll be like a boat just passing by this atoll, which is uninhabited, by the way, so there's nothing here. And they will be like, oh, let's pull over. Oh, yes, hello, nice to meet you. Oh, I've got a spare autopilot. Would you like one? That would be amazing. So we can live in hope.
I got to get this screwed all the way through, but it's magnetic. And those magnets that I've sealed in place just keep pulling it in all directions. It's really hard to make it fit.
Fine motor control, but with everything trying to work against you.
Motor. Where's the hole gone?
Wiggle, wiggle.
Tighten the other one up. That'll help.
All right, I'm going to leave Ian putting that back together, and I am going to get on with a bunch of the things that broke on our passage here, because it turns out that sailing upwind for 4 days straight is not terribly fun and a really good way to break everything on your boat. So let me take you on a tour of everything that suddenly requires our attention. All right, first thing that broke was our outhaul. It chafed through on our way here. We didn't actually notice until we arrived. So the back of the sail wasn't being pulled away from the mast, but thankfully it chafed through quite near the end. So we can just pull a little bit more through and retie it off. We'll maybe have to look at why it chafed and sort the problem there as well. Onto the mast. So a fairly major one here is our topping lift clutch has fallen off the mast. So that is definitely needing to be fixed quite soon. It means that we have to use a winch if we want to secure our topping lift, but we also use the winches for the main halyard and for our reefing line. So it kind of puts everything much more limited when we're underway. Also, I noticed that there is a line that just ties the sail onto one of the cars that goes up and down the mast that has almost chafed through. So that is preventative. It's not a problem yet, but we're catching it early. So we have like battens through our mainsail, and every second car goes to a batten, and the ones in between just are tied on to the sail. But the bottom one is different for some reason. I don't know, but it has been designed like that. There is just this string, basically, that ties the sail onto the bottom car. And as you can see, one of the 3 strands is gone. So yeah, I'm just going to untie that and retie it. There's also a bunch of leaks on our hatches around the boat, but I'm going to start with the easy jobs. So yeah, this is job number 1 for me, tying on a piece of string. And then up here, we've discovered a little leak. So it's really hard to see. Basically, where these rain curtains come around, I have been meaning to remake this corner one so that it fits better. At the moment, the zip is all sort of warped and doesn't join onto here. So when it rains really hard, all of the rain comes off the hardtop, falls in a waterfall off the front, and then just comes in this gap, which isn't too much of a problem. But one of the screws along the base of the track here has kind of worked its way loose, and the sealant that used to be there has just clearly worn away and disappeared. So now we get a bit of a torrential downpour inside through our ceiling. So I'm going to try and seal that up, and then hopefully with all these rain showers around, we will be slightly more watertight. I heard a celebratory noise. Ian, what's happened?
Once I reassembled it, it got that main axle in line, so that spins really smoothly.
It didn't do that before.
Well, that's because the big magnet motor assembly wasn't perfectly straight inside the magnet, so it was being sucked to the sides. Whereas now that this end is secured,
yeah,
and then now that the carbide brushes are touching it, it runs smoothly. I've chipped that cog, which is a bit annoying, but that's fine.
Oh yeah, well that doesn't matter.
Turns out that doesn't come off. But it runs in both directions.
Oh, so we can't just turn right, we can turn left as
We
well.
can turn left as well. And it's amazing what superglue does.
Does that mean
We might,
the plan is back on?
If I can remember how it all went back together.
Well, yes.
Then we have an autopilot and we can carry on to the Gambier.
Yeah, so we've been like trying to work out, okay, how can we fix this? If we can't fix it, can we buy a replacement somewhere? But then we'd have to sail somewhere because we're in the middle of nowhere, and so there's no post to here. And then what does that mean? Will we get to Gambier now, or is it just a delay? And like all of these thoughts have been swirling around our heads, and we've sort of not been wanting to admit
Defeat.
not getting there. Exactly. Not wanting to admit defeat. We're not wanting to give up, but also we're having to be sensible, and setting sail for like 800 miles and only being able to do 2 hours at a time hand steering is probably not wise. So it's still going to take a little bit of time to get our heads around the fact that the plan might be back on again, but this is exceedingly good news.
All right, so now that motor that we had connects by a belt here to this thing, which is actually really cool. It's an electromagnetic clutch. So when this system locks up to stop the helm free spinning, it literally magnets together, and that won't be able to turn, and then it releases it. Okay. And then it can spin again.
Yeah.
So the clutch has its own control wires, and then the motor has its own voltage wires, which are much higher rated, I suppose. So yeah, we just have to mount the motor back onto the plate, put the belt back on, then marry up that cog with this horrible little mesh of gears.
So this is the really fun bit when you have to climb inside the cupboard to put it back together.
Pretty much. Yeah, there's so many parts of our boat that are really well designed, but this cupboard, actually, we do have a friend, I'm going to name check. Mandy has told me she fits inside this cupboard and can stand up.
Mandy, we need you.
Where's your Mandy when you need one? I mean, I cannot understand how anyone could fit in that space. I've tried.
I think you should try again. We all want to see that.
It doesn't look pretty. And I need to fit the autopilot steering chain before we go any further, because this is now where it actually needs to be like tensioned up so it actually works. So this has to get back on.
Definitely feel like I should be helping, but I've seen how mucky your hands are and I don't really want to touch it.
Thanks for your commitment to the cause.
But I believe in you, you're doing great.
You could turn the helm for me.
Uh-huh.
And you steer to starboard slowly because you bite my fingers off.
Okay, starting to turn.
Yep.
That speed okay?
Yep. That's it.
Okay, so it is all reassembled. We are going to test it now. So I am just going to turn it on here and just like pick a heading 90 degrees off. It's not ideal because we're not moving, so the boat won't really turn, so it won't get much feedback. But hopefully it'll at least try, and we'll see if the motor spins around, and we'll wait for an excited yay from Ian inside. Okay, you ready?
Ready. Woohoo!
Yeah?
It's working.
It's working!
Back the other way. Yeah!
Port.
It's good.
It works! The dream is alive!
We're going to the Gambier.
Let's go! Oh my goodness, well done. That's absolutely insane.
That's mental.
I don't think I know anyone else who could rebuild an autopilot with 0 spare parts.
And super glue.
I
just use super glue. That's all I needed.
You use tools?
Yeah.
In a completely remote, uninhabited atoll in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Here's a broken autopilot that's completely smashed itself to pieces. Fix it! You have 24 hours.
Yeah. I got it. I think, well, now we just have to bolt it to the heavy bracket and get the chain on and make sure it's all tensioned right. But it freely spun each way and it didn't make the grindy noises it was making last night.
Oh my goodness.
So that's good.
You're incredible. Well done.
Was it last night? Night before?
Who knows? Losing track.
Blurring together now.
Okay, the wind and rain have died down a little bit today. We've still got a couple of days before we have a good enough weather window that we can actually leave this place. But today we thought we should actually test our autopilot motor. So we're going to lift anchor and just head out inside the lagoon and just sort of do some circles and see if it will actually control our rudders. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, so we've been seeing like 18, 20, 25 knots pretty consistently for the last day. aside from the big storms that come through, which hammer us is like 30 knots or something stupid. So the anchor's probably fairly well bedded.
Sorry if it's a bit windy out here. We're seeing like 20 knots today. We're just gonna head into the middle of the lagoon where hopefully there aren't too many bommies near the surface, and then we'll just wiggle our way around and see if this autopilot takes us where we want to go. Ideally, without hitting anything. How far out do you wanna go?
I mean, we don't have to go miles out because then we just find more coral heads, but we're only in 17 meters of water right now.
Yeah, it gets deep quite quick, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think we can get it just over the edge, then it goes to like, what, 25, 30? Then I feel comfortable that we could give it a decent go.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we can...
Try it.
All right, I'm gonna do it. Let's see if it takes control of the wheel.
It's moving by itself!
I don't know where it's going though.
I don't care, it's moving by itself. Oh no, it's really not going
No, that is a problem.
anywhere.
Where are we going? Why are we turning?
I'm not sure how much you can hear from inside, but basically this is the cupboard where our autopilot is, and I can see it's moving, and basically you probably can't hear it. That's a good sign, because when we were sailing here, it was so grindy that I was like asleep in our cabin and still hearing it going, "Grrr." But now the motor at least is behaving so beautifully. It's just whirring around, turning the chain, turning the wheel, turning the rudders, doing what it should do. So that is a very good sign, and our super glue on the magnets seems to be holding. The confusing part is that it's like massively overactive, and although it's moving, it's not really going where we're asking it to go.
What I think is happening here is the motor is fixed, but the compass issue that we had isn't, I think, because we should be facing like 170 degrees, so just before south, if you like, or just past south. And Zora and the autopilot, even they disagree. That's so weird. So Zora thinks that it's a 273, so about 100 degrees off. And the autopilot thinks we're at 294, so 120 degrees off.
So we cannot work out what the compass issue is doing, which we're trying to hold on to the celebratory moment that the motor works when it absolutely wasn't yesterday. So yeah, there is sort of a win, but it's definitely tainted because there's a much bigger problem that we still need to figure out. But we've tried a bunch of stuff and we can't quite get our heads around it now. So we're just gonna go and drop anchor, and then maybe some inspiration will come to us, hopefully. How beautiful is this anchorage? The color of the water is just absolutely unreal. We have moved slightly further down, a few motus, a few islands further down from where we were this morning, because there's too much beauty in this world to stay in one place. But there are a few bommies around. So I'm just gonna go for a little swim and check that they are all deep enough that they're not gonna cause a problem if the wind shifts and we sort of move over the top of them. Ian has entered his thinking phase where his brain works at 1,000,000 miles an hour and he tries to think up 100 different solutions, creative and otherwise, to see if he can figure out what's going on with the autopilot. I am no use to him at this point, so I'm gonna do something helpful and swim in the beautiful ocean.
Well, it's a beautiful day for a sail. So we decided to test the autopilot by motoring across the lagoon from over there in the grey to over here in the grey. And the autopilot held course, so the motor is good. The compass didn't deviate while we were crossing the lagoon particularly, not in any noticeable way. But I can't say that we've fixed it because we don't know what was causing it. All I know is we've done a bunch of compass swings and a bunch of auto-learn passes that the autopilot insists on. And we did get our deviation down on the compass. If you know any of these words, you'll know what I mean. If you don't, basically we tried to do the setup process over and over again. And it got a little bit better each time. So we're hoping that it was just poorly configured and that now it is going to run smoothly. And the reason we're hoping is because we plan to go out and sail in that, because we have something of a deadline on this whole gamble idea. And the pass time is in 30 minutes. So we're going to shoot out over toward the pass, which is just on the edge of the grey, just past those two green blobs in the distance. And then we'll hang a left, go through the pass. Hopefully it's nice and flat for us. And then on to the next stop, which is a nice, clean 4 days away, maybe, with rain, lightning, thunder, swell, and a possibly dodgy autopilot. This is a good idea. We're almost out of these and then we're all good.
Well done.
You all right?
Yeah, all good. The pass was a little bit wobblier than we were expecting. We managed to avoid most of the standing waves by kind of holding in against one side, but we made it through, and the good news is that the autopilot is doing a pretty good job at holding direction. So we're now out in the swell, we're rolling around a little bit. The waves are probably 1.4 and every so often we get a bigger one. But we haven't like done a massive veer off track. So far things are looking very, very good. We are just in for a wet ride. It is very squally out here. We have got one big rain cloud about to pass over the top, and then as soon as that's out of the way, we'll turn and get the sails up and head that way. The bad news is that our bilge alarm is going off, won't stop, so we must be taking on water, and if we can't sort this out quickly, we have a really big problem on our hands.